All right. So let's work on the initial models. So yeah, so we're building a charity auction website. We've had a few episodes so far. We created this sort of like basic server side requirements. So we created that in GitHub. We've got our basic Rails app set up. Now we're going to sort of create the initial models. At least we'll do part of that in this episode. We'll probably not finish, and we'll come back and keep going next time. All right, so I'm going to share my entire screen this time. Great, okay. So there we go. There's the page for this event. I don't need. So I'm going to have GitHub around. And then we'll switch between that and Atom and the terminal. And since you're watching, I will not check Twitter, which I would typically do too often. Okay, so let's go to GitHub first, take a look at the issues that we had. So as I said in episode 2, where I looked at how I sort of enter in the basic issues into GitHub, I put ready on all the ones that are ready to work now. So I'm going to filter to those, take a look at which ones there are to work on, and then we'll sort of just get going. Okay, so I think that auction is probably as upstream as it gets. So let's do that one. So the auction model, we've got just some basic, simple requirements, right? Here are the attributes. We went through those in episode 2. So what I'm going to do is just create a model that has these and check them off one at a time. Okay, so I don't think this is terribly TDD what I'm going to do, even though I would say I practice TDD pretty well. But I'm going to add in the initial generation of the model all of these attributes, just because I think it's a little bit quicker. And I think if I was organized like this and had this list, I think that's the way I would actually do it, just to save me a little bit of time. And then I would add tests in to make sure that everything was as I expected. So let's do that. All right, so we've got starts at, which is a date time. Now, I'm not that good at remembering all of the fancy generator syntax, so I just do the basics, which is the list of the attributes. Okay, so we've got ends at. Okay, we've got a time zone string. Now, I'm actually going to call this, I think, time zone ID. And let me open up Dash. So I want this to be named the same way that it's named in active support time zone. I believe that it has a method called, so inside of TZ info, let's see. Time zone. All right. So, and the reason I'm going to look this up is just to remind myself what the, so I don't see it, but I'm going to call this time zone ID because I'm pretty sure that's what it's called inside of TZ info. All right, so that's a string, and then what else do we have? Okay. All right, so I've got that. Now what I tend to do is I tend to look into the migration, and anything that is going to be required, in all cases, I'm going to set a null false on it. Like for example, I never want to have an auction without a name. Let's just say, so I'm going to say, well, you know what? I'm not going to do that for now. Starts, ends. I think it'd be reasonable to create an auction before you had the time scheduled for it. So I think we do not. I think we're not going to have null false on any of these except for the timestamps, which is the default. So we'll probably add some idea of like whether the auction is complete or not, but complete and valid, I think will be a different idea. So I'm just going to keep that. All right, so let's run the migration here, and then cool. So let's now go through this. So I've got a pretty simple philosophy about the specs, which is that any attribute I want mentioned in the spec so that you could get a full understanding of what the attributes were by looking at the spec. You wouldn't have to either look at the migration or look at the model itself. So we're going to add one just to test that every one of these attributes is there. Okay, so I added shoulda matchers, so this can be a little bit easier because otherwise it'd be a little bit monotonous. But shoulda matchers has this matcher in it, which again, I think some people think is a little stupid, but I don't think it's stupid from a documentation standpoint. That I always look at the spec to learn about the model, and this makes sure that the spec then is sort of a complete representation of what it has. Okay, and I mean, hey, it's not going to take that long even while talking. All right, so let's just take a look at all the ones that I want to add. Time zone ID, we've got physical address. And you can see it's picking up those tokens off of this migration. So that's why I have it open, which is pretty nice. Name and then donation window ends at. And again, I mean, we'll see this. This is sort of simple and a little bit silly for this example, but great. Now at least I can see when I look in that it has all of the attributes that I'd expect. And there we go. I'll check these off. Now, I haven't, and I tend not to like articulate what all of the requirements are before I start going. I think that this was nice because we were careful last night in going through what the needs were of the application, and these are the right attributes. We didn't do it for the validations. So I think that what we're going to do is add some validations in. We're going to sort of live create the requirements, and I'll make specs for each of them. So I think that as a first one, I think that if we have donation window ends at, well, what I was thinking is maybe do we want to require that the time zone be there if the dates are there? But I don't think so. I mean, I think the time zone wouldn't have to be there. That's just sort of a presentation issue, and that could come later. So I'm going to skip that. I think the only one that I see is that the ends at needs to be after the starts at, right? And so I think that we want to add a validation for that. And then the donation window ends at has to be before the starts at also. Or starts at has to be after that. So there's some validations around that. Why don't we add them in now? So I'll do that just by sort of adding in tests for each of these. Okay, let's see. Ends at is after starts at. We've got starts at is after donation window ends at. I think that those are the only two, right, that we need. Yeah, I think that's right. Okay, so now I'll run these and it'll show those as pending. I think that that's a pretty helpful thing to do when you've got a handful of sort of requirements you're going to extract from either just a brainstorming process or off of a document or using the application or whatever. I'll just create some pending tests and then go through and fix them. So let's do this one first. So ends at is after starts at. So we're going to say right, so I'll make this whatever date here. And then I will set the starts at to, say we want it to be invalid, so we'll do +1. And sometimes I think maybe it's a little bit easier if you write advance, but so because of the seconds there. So we'll have the starts at come 1 second afterwards. We'll validate it, and then we'll expect the subject errors for the ends at to include must come after let's see, must be greater than or starts at. Okay. So we'll run this and we'll see that it does not fail, or it fails, which is what we want. So we'll switch back over here and we'll add that validation. So we'll do validates ends at. Then what is the, when it's, so I don't remember if I can use the built-in comparison here. So I don't think I can. So if I do numericality, which is obviously sort of sounds funny, so greater than starts at, I just want to see what happens. Yeah, okay. So I didn't think that that worked. So we're going to do, we're going to add a little method that does this. And then I may look and see if there's a built-in way. I don't think so. So validate ends at after starts at. Let's see, so return unless starts at and ends at. Okay, and then we'll say if ends at. Now I tend to write these in sort of a positive way, so I'll say if ends at is less than or equal to starts at. And errors.add ends at, and then now this, I think that matches the way that Rails does the numericality matchers for greater than, which I think is nice. Okay, so there we go. Now it passes. That seems fine. And I'm not going to get hung up on if this is precious. I want this to be very easy to read, dead clear what it does, and I think that's the case. So you can see I added an underscore to this method. I tend to never mark methods as private except through the underscore, and that's just because I think with Ruby it's weird to have private methods. I think it's harder to read in code if you're calling a private method or a public method. If they're marked private in Ruby but don't have an underscore, so I do it this way because the point is to communicate to myself. Okay, so we've got that. Now let's fix this one too. So it's going to be the exact same idea here. And in fact, I think I can just copy this. All right, so we're going to have this be starts at, and this one be all right. Now, obviously, when you see me do this, it seems very clear that there's some duplication here, and maybe I want to extract this, but not yet. That doesn't seem necessary. So I'll run this. I see that same error, And again, it's going to look like this is repeating, but don't worry about if there's a little bit of duplication in the first place. Once we've got good tests, it's very easy for us to change this, which I think is a good habit to get into. To first get it working and have it be nice and clear, and then worry about how dry it is after the fact. Starts at after this guy. Okay. And that's sort of my philosophy on this, on working on anything really, is I just don't sweat how dry it is at first. I think it works better that way. I think you tend not to waste time extracting things too early, which is a good habit to get into. Okay, so starts at is less than or equal to. All right, there we go. Those all are fine now. So I've added those validations. Let's just take a look and see if we see anything else. I don't think so. I think sometimes you can get a little bit like wild at the beginning of a project and end up fidgeting with validations too much before you've built out the models. Now, I mean, I'm a pretty big fan of locking down the models so that we don't have any possibility of having bad data in both in database sort of constraints as well as in the validations on the model. But I don't think we're ready to do anything else now. Well, here's one. No, I'm going to take that back. So time zone ID, we want to make sure that that is a valid time zone ID, right? Because we don't want to, we need to be able to sort of depend on using it to modify or convert the UTC time into local time. So let's do that. All right. So let's see. Time zone ID is a valid time zone ID. All right, so I'm going to say time zone ID equals, Mars time. It's obviously not real. I don't remember if this is actually the name of this error, but that's fine. We'll see in a little bit. So we see no errors, and we expect this error. So let's now fix that. Okay. So now let's take a look at the documentation for the inclusion measure. So let's see. So Rails guides, and I think these have pretty good documentation about the validations. So let's take a look. Okay, so here we go. We've got the various validation helpers. Remember, we just did that one about date before. I wondered if there was a built-in one, but I don't see anything that'd be obvious, so maybe there isn't. This is an inclusion idea, so we're going to take a look at what that is. So we want to validate the time zone ID inclusion in, and then the list of valid time zone IDs. So really all we need to do then is get that list of valid time zone IDs. So let's take a look at the documentation for active support time zone and see if that gives to us what we're looking for. All right. Let's see. Now all okay, so we want to use that and then map the time zone IDs. All right. Yeah, so let's just take a look at this in our terminal. Okay. So what do we want here? Canonical zone seems to be, that seems to sound like what we want. Oh, that was on TZ info, wasn't it? Yeah. Let's take a look at the TZ info. And I mean, maybe we just should use the 2S on. Let's take a look at what that is. So, I mean, I think that this has the attractiveness of being kind of nice to read, which would look pretty good in a dropdown, I think. I don't know that it's the right way to do it because I don't think this is a standard representation of the time zone. It makes me feel a little queasy to use that. I don't think we probably want that. Let's go back to our TZ info. See what else we've got. Oh, there we go. Identifier. I bet that's what we want. Okay, there we go. That's what we want. So I'm going to just map the identifiers then and make sure that it's included in that. And then okay, so expected is not included in the list. Must be in list. So is not included in list was the syntax. So we will go back and change that. The list. Okay. There we go. We've got that. That seems fine. And I think that we've got our auction model, basically, right? Yep, I think so. Great. Well, I think we probably want to, we want to be able to have a nil time zone because that cannot, or a blank one, because that cannot be set. So let's make sure it's allowed. So time can be nil. We'll say blank because it could be blank too. All right. Now, see, it says it's not include the list, so we need to just add something on here, which is allow blank true. And now it's fine. Okay, so now we go back and just take a look at this auction class. We can see if when we come back later and totally forget what we built, we can see what the attributes are. We can see what the validations are. You may want to do something, and I don't always do this, but I think it's reasonable when people do. You can group these into, like describe validations so that when we look at the printout of all of the tests, now you can see, okay, here's the validations here. Perhaps we could do describe attributes. Because the idea that the specs themselves or the format output of the spec runner could be documentation of what the app is doing, I think is pretty attractive. So auction attributes validations, that is nice and clean. And I think that The model itself looks fine. I tend to just leave a space in between everything and have it, you know, be spaced out pretty nicely. So I think I'm going to add that and be good to go with that one. Okay, add auction model. I don't have to write more of a description on this one. Oh, now if I was clever, I would have remembered to close that issue with that push, but I forgot, so. All right. So here we go, we've got that one done. We've got the rest of the models to do, but those will go really fast when we resume. You know, the only one that's really got a lot going on to it is the donation model, but even that isn't all that complicated. So, all right, so that finishes the first model. Kind of get you an idea of the workflow that we're going to use. It should be real smooth sailing to get the basic sort of set of models up and running, but we'll continue that next time because I got to go to do some work. See ya.